Antiderivative still.
Joining me on this epic journey is Tygerstripes and a special guest for 2 chapters. This chapter, chapter 7 and chapter 8, we have Scotty R37.
Bombadillo!
Hello.
Hello and welcome to A Year's Journey Through Middle-earth, Book 1, Chapter 7, In the House of Tom Bombadil. We started in the Shire. We got through the Crick Hollow and Buckland and the Old Forest. And the Old Forest was where we met Tom Bombadil, and he saved all the hobbits from the trees, the trees that were trying to devour them. And
it's just the one evil tree, right?
Actually, all the trees are really pissed off at
Yes.
anybody who can roam around freely. They're really jealous and upset.
They're particularly angry at hobbits because in the long past, the hobbits burned down a whole area of Old Forest to kind of push the Old Forest back.
And the hobbits were very lucky that Tom Bombadil just happened to be picking some water lilies. And here we are in chapter 7. He invited them to his home. And the first person they meet is Goldberry, surrounded by water lilies, and her dress is green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew.
How
and
pretty.
She welcomes them as Goldberry, daughter of the river. Come, dear folks, she said, taking Frodo by the hand. Laugh and be merry. I am Goldberry, daughter of the river. This kind of talk is how you know you're at a party. Fear nothing. For tonight, you're under the roof of Tom Bombadil. So maybe there's some sort of protection that Tom has over the land that he's a master of. The hobbits look at her in wonder, and she looked at them and smiled. Fair Lady Goldberry, said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved. With the joy he did not understand, he stood, as he had at times stood, enchanted by elven voices. But the spell that was now laid upon him was different. From this we can tell... She can also tell from Frodo's song about her, because Frodo realizes who she is, and he knows a song about her, and he sings it, and she can tell that he's an elf friend. And so there's this interesting parallel that we're going to see throughout this chapter between Goldberry and Tom and elves, and they can tell when someone is an elf friend somehow. I don't know how that's visible, but it sure is. And look at that picture.
Yes, and it's interesting because everybody always keeps asking who and what are Tom and Goldberry, because they're really not like anything else in Middle-earth. And one of the ways you can tell that Goldberry is not an elf is because Frodo sort of recognizes her as not an elf.
Yes, although there are similarities.
But that seems to be the vagary of the situation. And when asking, what is Tom Bombadil? And Goldberry says, he is. And that's it. He's bigger than...
Right.
He's bigger than a hobbit, and he's not a giant man. He's not a human, and it's all left very ambiguously as to what he is. And then it does go on to reference, as you guys discussed last time, that he's seen the first drop of rain. He's seen the first acorn. He's always been. And it just becomes a question as to what does that mean? And from what I understand, Tolkien scholars have been saying for a while, the only person who can explain who Tom Bombadil is no longer with us. And anytime there has been speculation as to what Tom Bombadil is, whether it be references to Christianity or divinity, it's like, this is where I think Tolkien got it. And then Tolkien would say, no, I did not. And so even the ambiguity coming from the author himself, I think, is enigmatic and kind of interesting, or at least that's what I found in my research.
Yes, he's very mysterious, and you could hear him singing outside because he's tending to the little ponies, and you can hear him singing, Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow.
Tolkien himself, in a letter, said, I would not, however, have left Tom Bombadil in if he did not have some kind of function. I might put it this way. The story is cast in terms of a good side and a bad side, beauty against ruthless ugliness, tyranny against kingship, moderated freedom with consent against compulsion, that has long lost any object save mere power, and so on. But both sides, in some degree, conservative or destructive, want a measure of control. But if you have, as it were, taken a vow of poverty, renounce control and take your delight in things in themselves without reference to yourself, watching, observing, and to some extent knowing, then the questions of the rights and wrongs of power and control might become utterly meaningless to you, and the means of power quite valueless. It is a natural pacifist view which always arises in the mind when there is a war.
Tom Bombadil is there because even though the story gets dark, there's goodness in the world also, and he's the representation of that, first of all. But what do you think Tolkien meant?
It was in a letter that he wrote to someone, so he was being very personal there and probably trying to describe his motivation for putting the character in the story non sequitur, just dropping it in that way. Tom's original inspiration was a wooden peg doll owned by Michael, one of Tolkien's children, and another of his children, John, tried to flush this doll down the toilet, thus inspiring tales of Tom's many escapes from drowning. And Tolkien himself wrote, "The doll looked very splendid with the feather in its hat, but John did not like it and one day stuffed it down the lavatory. Tom was rescued and survived to become the hero of a poem." And Tom's one of the first things that Tolkien wrote. He wrote it in the 30s. There's lots of children's literature that references things like this. There's The Water Babies, which was a very popular children's book of the time, with all of these different nymphs and creatures and mythological beings that live in the water, which sort of spark a reference to Goldberry there.
Yes,
And
definitely.
And then the one that
Tom Bombadil was written well before The Lord of the Rings was written, and he was added to this story.
Yes.
Our company, the Hobbits, have not met up with Gandalf yet, so it is very lucky that they have met up with Tom Bombadil as some help.
I hear a connection to Peter Pan. It's a really small connection in the poem, the original poem, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. After Tom catches hold of Goldberry, said Tom Bombadil, "Here's my pretty maiden. You shall come home with me. The table is all laden. Yellow cream, honeycomb, white bread and butter, roses at the windowsill and peeping round the shutter." And this is really similar to a line in Peter Pan where Wendy and the Lost Boys are exchanging stanzas. They believe they've killed her, but she's alive, and she asks them in poetry to build a little house for her. At some point, they break into song. "We've built the little walls and roof and made a lovely door. So tell us, Mother Wendy, what are you wanting more?" To this she answered rather greedily, "Oh, really, next I think I'll have gay windows all about, with roses peeping in, and babies peeping out." And so the roses peeping it could have been accidental. It could have just been something in his mind that, came to the fore. There's just that connection between Peter Pan and Tom Bombadil. They're completely other. They're out of mythology. They are.
I think it's something that not only speaks to the character of Tom Bombadil, but also why I'm here. Is Tom Bombadil shows up, and he doesn't hear the cries of the hobbits. He just shows up, and he's got his tray of water lilies, and it's like, "Did you hear us calling for help?" And he's like, No, I just stumbled across you, and that was a good thing. Come on, let's rest.
Yes, it was all luck.
And it's all just a welcoming not the last supper, but the last feast before going into the true danger, going to the first checkpoint. It's like, take this, you're going to need it. It's dangerous out there. And it's just rest, and there's a vision that Frodo has. And all is explained
What was that? A Legend of Zelda quote?
That was a Legend of Zelda quote.
It's dangerous. Take this.
Yeah, and it is just sort of a last respite before we get into the adventure proper. And I think it's really speaking to the adventure itself. Once you leave home and then you do find somewhere comfortable and you kind of want to stay there. You're like, okay, this is far enough. This is nice and comfortable, but there's more work to do and you have to venture forward. And even the adventure that you're going on, Tom doesn't care. Tom doesn't care.
Yeah. Before we get to how much Tom doesn't care, I do want to mention how nurturing he is. He's taking care of the ponies. He collects lilies for Goldberry. He does a lot of very service
Husbandly
things.
things.
Yeah, he's a wonderful
wonderful
husband.
caretaker. I love this picture of them particularly because in the first poem about Tom, which was written in 1934, Goldberry, when she encounters Tom leaning over the riverbank, she pulls him in by the beard. And at some point, she has hold of his hat. She's stolen his hat. So I love this picture where she's wearing his hat. And this is a sort of a Zoftig Goldberry, who is supposed to be slender as a willow wand, I think. But I like her a little bigger.
That's
Absolutely.
really sweet.
Yes.
I wondered about that. He tells the hobbits, "You shall clean any grimy hands and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks, and comb out your tangles." Hey, wait a second. Shouldn't I be having Scotty read Tom Bombadil quotes?
I was expecting to. You shall clean grimy hands and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks and comb out your tangles.
Well, that was way better than my reading. Thank you.
He kind of reminds me of Yukon Cornelius in a way.
Well, and he also has this perfect little penthouse for them to sleep in later. Well, what's interesting about it is there are exactly 4 mattresses. That's so specific for him to have exactly the right number of beds. So do you think it's possible if there had been 6 guests in his home, he would have just somehow had 6 mattresses?
I do, and I don't think it was a coincidence that he found them, that he heard Frodo's cries for help when they were trapped by Old Man Willow. I think there's a synchronicity there that's a little something more than luck.
He says it's luck, and you're supposed to believe it's luck, but I agree with you that it wasn't just luck. Also similar to the elves, he also has magical drink that is, it just seems to be regular water, but it went to their hearts like wine and set free their voices. The guests became suddenly aware that they were singing merrily, as if it were easier and more natural than talking.
Well, yeah, and it is sort of the light, the dawn before the dark, because they're going to be going forth. This is the last rest stop before the real business begins.
And what a lovely rest stop.
I do really enjoy the way that Frodo asks Goldberry and says, "So he is the master of the wood, the water, and the hill?" Frodo says, "Then this strange land belongs to him?" And she's like, "Oh, no, that would be far too much of a burden. He just tends to it. That's all. He doesn't own it. None of this is his. He just likes it, and he does it for the sake of everyone else."
Even though he is the master, though, so it's a little contradictory. He doesn't own any of it. There's no fencing. He doesn't say this is my land, and he doesn't put barriers anywhere. It's anyone can go on it. It's not his, but he's the master, and he's not afraid of anything.
No, the feast that they enjoy before they retire to their penthouse. Even Frodo has more questions, and everyone's like, no, hush. We'll deal with that in the morning.
We don't want nightmares right now. We don't want to hear more about Old Man Willow because that'll be super scary. So let's talk about that tomorrow. That also makes me happy how they're all shown where they're going to sleep. They're well fed. Then they're set in chairs with the fire going in the hearth. And this is exactly what happens when I go meet my friend who lives in the hill country. So Tom's hospitality is top notch. It's the best. They're told not to worry about anything. Then he sings more songs. There's lots of songs we're not singing.
I looked for their songs. I think were all real. I believe that Tolkien actually had music for everything that he ever wrote. He knew how the tune would go. Oh yes.
Really?
Yeah, but I looked online and I can't find anybody who's recorded that. I can't find recordation of it. But they were actual songs and not just verses.
Did he? Oh, so he didn't record it, or maybe the recordings are lost?
I don't think so, but it's pity. I can't find any. I can't find any signs of it. But I just keep hearing over and over again that he composed the music. He had the tunes. Some of the times he just used old tunes that were existing folk tunes. But it was like his mapping of Middle Earth. Everything was in place.
Wow, Scotty R37. Could you see what you could make of this? It may not be tokens exactly, but I want to hear what you come up with.
No. I had an errand there, gathering water lilies, green leaves and lilies, white and please my pretty lady. Nope, this is terrible. I can't carry a tune. I can't do a Tom Bombadil.
You're not doing badly.
The last year the years, and to keep them from the winter, to flower by her pretty till the snows are melted.
Yes, Tom always speaks in meter. I think I spoke of this last time, and from
You
the best I
did.
can tell is that it's Alexandrine,
Yes.
which is a type of metrical line.
And I tried to find, and again, when you're reading sort of tempo, I couldn't get it. I don't read music, and so I wasn't 100% sure on how to lilt the lyrics, if you will.
Oh, you did fine. And
I enjoyed it.
The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, at some point, the publisher wanted a longer, which was the first poem in 34. The publisher wanted to put together a book of verse with more poems to fill out to make enough for a small book of poetry. Poetry books are generally pretty small. The Adventures of Tom Bombadil is subtitled Verses from the Red Book. Like Lord of the Rings and the appendices, Tolkien has set this in context to the Lord of the Rings, as if this was written by a Hobbit scholar or somebody who was commenting on the Red Book of Westmarch, which was Bilbo and Frodo's stories that they themselves recorded and that were amended by a few other people, but that's what the Red Book is. I found this in the preface, so this is Tolkien's work. The Red Book contains a large number of verses. A few are included in the narrative of the downfall of the Lord of the Rings, or in the attached stories and chronicles. And that just gave me the chills when I read that, because I don't think, the Hobbits don't just call this the Lord of the Rings. The Hobbits call this story the downfall of the Lord of the Rings. I don't think I'd ever put that together before.
Well, it makes sense. It's kind of like when I
Yes.
went to Vietnam, they didn't call it the Vietnam War, they called it the American War. It's just sort of from the perspective, it would be the downfall of the Lord of the Rings because the One Ring has to be destroyed, so there can be no Lord of Ring.
For me, I always consider the Lord of the Ring to be Frodo, because he is the one with the power to destroy it, and the one who...
Oh, I always saw him as a ring bearer. I never really thought of him as the Lord of the Rings. That's a new one for me.
That's in context of the Hobbits, and that's the historian that Tolkien is creating all of these false histories, and they just go so deep. I have here too that Tolkien commented that even in a mythical age, there must be some enigmas, as there always are. Tom Bombadil is one. And in a letter to Stanley Unwin, Tolkien called Tom Bombadil the spirit of the vanishing landscapes of Oxfordshire and Berkshire. However, this 1937 letter was in reference to works which predated the writing of The Lord of the Rings. Part of Tom is about watching the progress of the urban and suburban blight and the destruction of natural landscapes.
And I got that myself as well, just because of his carefree nature.
And his care for everything, like Jill said.
Well, carefree and care for. Like, it is something where he is gentle and supportive, but also he is carefree. He just does what he can do to help things that are around him, and he has no such ambitions to achieve more. He has what he needs, and he's happy with that.
Actually, if it's okay to mention a friend, he kind of reminds me of Canadian Spider-Man, who also cares for his home, and not just his home, but all his neighbors, everyone around him.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
He's a merry fellow.
That too. We do have to mention a dream. The dreams that the hobbits have. They're sleeping. Frodo's dreaming. He's dreaming about black riders on those big winged beasts that we're going to see later. Because every time Frodo dreams, he's having these premonitions because of the ring. The ring is giving him this foresight. This makes him afraid. He wonders if he'll ever have the courage to leave the safety of these stone walls. And Pippin's dreaming of the willow, so he's dreaming of being swallowed again by the willow. Merry's dreaming of drowning. The only hobbit who has no nightmare is Sam.
Because Sam is sleeping like a log.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a note here that Merry is dreaming of water streaming down and spreading all around the house into a dark, shoreless pool, which is also a bit of a premonition of his experience at Orthanc, where he and Pippin are surrounded by water.
Oh, that's right. When they get all the stores, but that was a good time. But they didn't. But he's not going to realize that.
But I'm sure there was some fear there too. As you watch the waters rising and just wonder, okay, how high is the water going to go?
Unfortunately, it's not such a sad ending for that one. But we'll get to that much later.
Yeah, I have a note here too that I had written 26th September Frodo is having prophetic dreams aplenty, but no, Gandalf was rescued by Gwaihir from the top of Orthanc in the early hours of the 18th of September. So Frodo's dream here is not prophetic, but it's something that has already happened.
Oh, okay. So not all his dreams are prophetic. Sometimes
No,
it's
some of
something
them
that's
are
already
just,
been done.
yes. And there's
Wow.
always so much more happening that the reader isn't witness to during the course of the story. Because all this time that Gandalf is missing, and you sort of feel, I know that my initial gut is, well, where is that man? We really need him. He's just off wizarding or something. When in fact, no, he's being held prisoner. And you don't find that out until later.
Right, exact. Thank you. I didn't know. I knew that there were black riders in that dream, but I didn't realize from when it came. Thank you. And they wake up the next morning, they feel refreshed. The forest, everything, it's a rainy day, so they've got to stay with Tom a little longer.
The line when they wake up is, they woke up all four at once in the morning light. And that's Tom's meter. That's the Alexandrine meter, the 12 syllables, which I just find so funny. It's like they're living in his world. It's even the narration.
I would love to visit.
Ring-a-ding-dillo, wake now, my merry friends. Forget the nightly noises. Ring-a-ding-dillo-dell, dairy-dell, my hearties. If you come soon, you'll find breakfast on the table. If you come late, you'll get grass and rainwater.
I like that because the hobbits take that threat.
I don't know,
very-
man. Little parody.
Oh, it was a little parody. You're right. Okay,
No,
I'll
it's
bring
good.
it back.
It's lovely.
Well, I really enjoy the spirit of Tom Bombadil, even though I don't understand. Basically, these chapters to me are, they take a nap, they have some food, they move on.
Yeah, basically, but I like to dwell on it a bit because it's very pleasant. It's a pleasant rest stop, as you call it.
Yes.
The hobbits take that threat very seriously. Frodo is happy the weather is bad because it's delaying them from departing. Tom Bombadil comes back. He has the power to ward off the rain completely from him, so he's completely dry except for his boots. So he returns and he tells the hobbits stories about the old forest. It is a rest stop, but it's also education. So they learn a little bit about the world. The world is becoming bigger for the hobbits. It's been so small for them living in the Shire this entire time. So he's telling them what he knows about his land. Eventually, of course, what to do next. So he's also a guide. But first, he's just telling stories. First about Old Man Willow, and Tom's words laid bare the hearts of the trees and their thoughts, which were often dark and strange, and filled with a hatred of things that go free upon the earth, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers, and usurpers. I really love the spirit of the trees that Tolkien injects into these books. You can definitely feel the rage of these poor trees that are stuck to be rooted, but they can still move and think. Old Man Willow is the most angry of the trees. He's basically the ruler of all of them, and somehow he's dug his roots to everyone. He also tells them about the Barrow-downs. So this is the warning of the adventures that they're going to have in the next upcoming when they leave Tom Bombadil's house. The Barrow-wights, we'll talk about them a little more later. They're scary.
They stay another day and night because it's raining, and they're all kind of relieved to be able to stay. While Tom's telling them all the history that you just recounted, Jill, Frodo still can't resist asking again, "Who are you, Master?" he asked. "Eh, what?" said Tom, sitting up and his eyes glinting in the gloom. "Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me who are you, alone, yourself, and nameless? But you are young, and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the Barrow-wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside." At some point down the line, in Elrond's house, they're all sort of speculating, and they mention Tom somewhat casually and say, if the Dark Lord overcomes everything and everyone, will Tom fall? And I think it's Elrond who says Tom will probably, since Tom was first, he will probably fall last.
As you guys will discuss when that conversation happens, it's like, so why don't we just give the ring to Tom Bombadil? Like, he doesn't seem to it doesn't have any effect on him. He doesn't seem to be drawn by its power. And I think Gandalf says to everybody, it's like, he doesn't respect it at all. And so he'll probably just misplace it, and then Sauron will get it. Like, he could not possibly know the weight of the responsibility of the ring.
They're having supper, and Tom is asking a whole bunch of questions. He's got a lot of news from the elves and even Farmer Maggot. And we find out that Tom really respects Maggot. There's earth under his old feet and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open. There's something about Tom that gets Frodo to tell him everything, even more things than he was telling to Gandalf. He says, "Show me the precious ring."
Interesting choice of words. And well, yeah, he does. He takes the ring and he looks at it. And the thing that really struck me about his beholding of the one ring is that he holds it up and he looks right through it. And at first I was like, oh, that would have been a cool shot, an interesting sort of cinematographic impression of, this means nothing to me. I can see right through it. And then he puts it on and it doesn't do anything. And everyone's like, why? Huh? It doesn't make you invisible? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so then he juggles it a little bit and does like a little sleight of hand. And Frodo is just like, oh, what do you mean? It disappeared. What did you do? And he's like, just kidding. Here you go. Here, it's back. And he double checks it. And he's like, make sure that it's not a fake. Because Tom is so enigmatic that it is a possibility that he could be some sort of sly creature who's trying to dupe. Sometimes you encounter a magical beast, being, or person who will lull you into a false sense of security, feed you, house you, and then be like, yoink, I got the thing I wanted. Not Tom. Tom doesn't want anything from anyone except, on your way. You can stay as long as you want, but you do have to go. And so he does. He fiddles with it. He plays with it. And then finally returns it, and just it doesn't have any effect. He understands that it's important to Frodo, but he knows that it has nothing to do with him. There you go, right there. Unaffected by Sauron's power and has control over life and nature. Doesn't give a fuck. And in sort of looking up this jolly old cat, one of the things that has been postulated, hypothesized, is that if there is an opposite to Sauron and his thirst for power and his desire to overtake everything, Tom is the complete opposite. He has no interest in power over anything. He doesn't want to subjugate anyone. In fact, he's just happy where he is. And I do like the idea that if Sauron were to win, then Tom would be the last one being like, I don't even know why you're here, man. What do you want? I love that idea. And I do appreciate that with no power comes no responsibility. I don't have any effect. This doesn't have anything. I understand you like it. And that's sort of the way, just to bring it back to a meta contextual conversation. This is how I feel about Lord of the Rings. Everyone says it's so important.
Yes, I do. I do understand that is your feeling, but it also carries further than that. Not only does he not disappear when he puts on the ring and can contrastly also make the ring disappear, he can also, when Frodo slips that ring on to make sure that it is real, Tom can still see Frodo.
Hey, come Frodo there. Where be you a-going? Old Tom Bombadil. Yeah, it is very piratey. Old Tom Bombadil, not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring. Your hand's more fair without it. Come back, leave your game, and sit down beside me. We must talk a while more and think about the morning. Tom must teach the right road and keep your feet from wandering.
That's the point where he becomes a guide.
It would have been, and the thing is that maybe this would have been sort of the whimsical guide that would have maybe hooked me more into the story moving forward, because he does have a superpower. Like, he can see people who are wearing the ring, and he can sort of I'll hold on to that for you, Frodo. I sound like Dexter Jetster from Star Wars Attack of the Clones.
I like how you read, Tom, so I'm happy to hear it. It's really interesting that Sauron's evil cannot even touch him. That is how good he is.
If you feel no burden, if you feel no responsibility, if you have no power, or at least you disregard any power that people may foist upon you, well, what can you take away? How can you hurt a person who doesn't feel like they have anything? And not only that, they don't want anything. They're just content with what is present before them. And Goldberry's there. She seems to be taken with him.
I love them both. It would be really great to meet. I want to meet them. The weather will be better tomorrow, and it's time for them to go.
There's someone else out there on YouTube who, boy, does she really get into Lord of the Rings. And she calls herself Girl Next Gondor, which is hilarious. And
Yes.
she had a video that I watched on Goldberry specifically, but the comments are really incredible. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, on people who really know the Silmarillion, which I still have not read. They're very lighthearted, though, still. Someone made a comment, and her heart was beating. A very interesting observation. That's a line about Goldberry specifically in the poem that when Tom is telling the hobbits about meeting Goldberry himself and taking her for his wife. And somebody replied, rules out Barrow white, I should hope. And then somebody else replies, yes, Goldberry has white arms, not white arms, which I thought was hilarious, just the puns. Someone says, well, it's not really that she's not a corporeal being, but it implies perhaps that there were other beings that did not have beating hearts. I mean, they're really just dicing it fine. And then somebody says, my interpretation of that line was always more along the lines of beating rapidly as opposed to the literal observation of her having a pulse. Tachycardia is a bit harder to fit into verse, though.
Maybe falling in love.
They keep going, and then at some point, and they're speculating on whether or not they're Aenir, all of these, demi-beings that spun off originally from the first being in Tolkien's universe. And then somebody said, I thought of you, Scotty, on both of these. Somebody said, I do not know where Tom came from, but I know where he went. In the Fourth Age, he became a rapper with the name Tom Bombadil, because he's de Bomb.
He's de Bombadil?
Yeah, de Bombadil. And then somebody replied, Goldberry was Ian Fleming's other choice for a Bond villain.
That is funny. I don't know. There's a comfort. There's a comfort between these two characters, not just because Goldberry being a companion and supportive not only of Tom but of the hobbits as well. She goes away to do chores. She never grumbles. She's always pleasant. But also, and so she's there as, I don't know, a spirit of nature as well. If he's the caretaker of nature, then she is the nature that he cares for. They are, and it's not in a sort of possessive way. It's very complimentary. And then the things that the hobbits learn too with Farmer Maggot. And it's like, wow, I never really thought about this guy like that before. And like the hobbits are like, I always thought he was a bit of a jerk. Yeah, but Tom likes him. He must be cool. And so just opening up the world a little bit more, even the world that they're coming from, opening it to where they're going. I do appreciate that in the characterization of him being forever. He knows what's up and he knows what's coming. Anyway, I'm going to smoke my pipe.
I also found a Reddit, just 2 comments from that. The Reddit topic was, who or what is Goldberry? And someone said, honestly, this is one of the things I love the most about Tolkien, that some things are just never explained. It creates this feeling of a larger universe that's been mapped out, but we're not seeing all the pieces of. The feeling that there's this rich backstory behind the novels that Tolkien had maybe planned out, but we only get glimpses of it, is something that makes the universe so real. And somebody replied to, are there other spirits like her? They said there are certainly other things, like the Watcher in the water. As Tolkien asserted, the world is gnawed by nameless things in Moria's deepest places, older even than Sauron and unknown even to him. Tolkien left many, many unsolved mysteries in his world. Intentionally, I think that the River Daughter is simply one more. Not having boundaries makes Tolkien's world seem infinite to the reader. This is a great thing.
Agreed. So, the story itself, as mentioned, there is the conversation with Gandalf and Elrond in terms of, well, we can't give the ring to Tom. And then at the end, after all is said and done, victory has been achieved. Gandalf is like, you know what I'm going to do? I need to have a long visit with Tom Bombadil. It doesn't dismiss the character as being trivial or inconsequential. It is still referenced so much later, like 2 books later. And I like that in terms of being self-referential. As well as you said, it's a world without boundary. And so the things that we've encountered along the way, even if you forgot about Tom Bombadil, Gandalf didn't.
That's true. It just spirals from here. From here on out, everything just gets bigger and bigger. We've got to learn from Tom to stay away from the Barrow-downs. Don't go to the stones. Stay on the green grass. Do the hobbits listen? Not really, but he
Well,
tries. He tries to
in,
tell.
in their defense, Tom advises them to stay west of any barrows they encounter. And he does plan their journey for the next day. But once you've lost your sense of direction, when somebody says, stay west of the barrows, you're completely screwed because who knows which direction is what when you're
It's
lost.
true. Yes, they do get lost. That's true. And so he teaches them a song that they're going to have to sing if they do get in trouble with the Barrow-wites.
Of course, it's a song.
Then he sends them off to bed and
Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadilio, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us.
he sends them off to bed.
It's its own topic, really. I just wanted to share with Scotty that, of course, this is from Wikipedia. The 1969 Harvard Lampoon novel Board of the Rings parodies Tom Bombadil as Tim Benzidine, a stereotypical hippie married to Hashberry. And one of his songs is rewritten as toke a lid, smoke a lid, pop the mescalino, stash the hash, gonna crash, make mine methadrino, hop a hill, pop a pill for old Tim Benzidrino. And it's just so very cruel. And yet somehow apt.
That's all for now, and we're going to continue our quest. Stay tuned.
Namarie.
This is the end. I'm going now. I bid you all a very fond farewell.